Great.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest that we have with us is Mitch Coven, and he's the owner and founder of Vitality Works. He is going to be speaking on the topic of what quality really means for herbal immunity. Thank you so much, Mitch, for joining us.
Sure. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Great. Great. Well, thank you. Hopefully, I can give everybody some information to increase your understanding of what quality means, how to recognize quality, and many of the things someone like myself goes through in crafting therapeutic and efficacious herbal products. A little bit of background. I am the founder and herbalist of Vitality Works. I spent my first 17 years in a clinical practice with patients and doing herbal education to practitioners ranging from herbalists to medical doctors on how to use botanicals in a therapeutic practice. So a lot of what I've learned has been through practical application in a clinical setting. Um, After those first 17 years, I've been spending the next 25 years um, processing and making botanical products for the public for many different brands that are out there. We don't market a Vitality Works brand. We are the contract manufacturer and provider for hundreds of brands out in the US marketplace, and especially for Marlene's Market, which is why I'm here today to help you understand, about herbs in general and quality and the Marlene's quality line. So I'm in year number 43, so a lot of experience in the industry and making things. And the whole goal behind quality is that we provide therapeutic and efficacious products that work. So, in talking about quality, also I'm in my home base is in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where my whole operation exists in a 150,000 square foot building with 310 people making herbal products 10 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we're busy. Lots of success. Um, First of all, I like to say, in terms of quality control and quality, FDA does define quality because, as opposed to what people may be reading, supplements are under FDA control and regulated by the FDA and the federal government. And they establish the minimum level of things you have to do around quality to ensure that what's on the label is really in the bottle. And it's minimal. Maximum quality is yet to be defined, but I'm going to talk about some of the differences between the minimum and the maximum because there is a bit of a split there. So again, the whole goal for us is having a therapeutic effect. And what's interesting in the FDA regulations, they don't discuss efficacy or results. So you can have products made with ingredients that aren't going to work, and that's legal. So we have to discuss, all of this in the full context. So in making herbal products, just like in cooking, quality starts with the quality of your raw materials. So if you're going to cook a meal, wouldn't you rather have fresh produce grown in your own organic garden in your backyard or from the farmer's market, health food store, and you're buying fresh, wholesome, potent or preferably organic raw materials that you're going to prepare that day or the next. Um, Materials that have been harvested that are older are going to lose nutrient content. They're going to change color. They're going to have less nutritional value to you. And so the botanicals we buy and use work because they have compounds in them and they age like everything else. So it may seem very sophomoric, but when you're dealing with quality and making herbal products, vitamins are different, nutraceuticals and minerals are a different story. Because when you're making vitamin C and B12, those compounds are single chemical compounds and they're stable. When we're buying botanicals, our goal is always to buy the recent harvest from whatever herb that is from the farm that year. And those harvests are usually only once a year. So we agree and contract out with our growers a year ahead of time so they can plan how much seed they need to get in the greenhouse and plant for us. and grow our materials we're buying fresh off the farms. And that's about as good as you can get. It's kind of like, even if you're eating fish, wouldn't you rather go to the dock and buy it off the boat as it freshly comes in versus something that was canned a year ago? And it seems, again, awfully sophomoric, but our goal is always to get fresh raw material. And you don't always know that. You know, a lot of brands that are out there, how do you even know this? You don't. Even people that work in the company probably don't know that. It's part of our mission. So we're getting whole raw materials. Then part of the quality that goes into these products is that we buy them as whole materials, meaning if I'm buying a root or a leaf, I don't want them powdered. 80+% of the herbal trade see the raw materials being traded as powders. And that's because it's less expensive to be powdered in some third world countries and lower paid labor, and to pack them densely and ship them in a smaller space than to ship big fluffy leaves and roots that don't compress very well. And so it's done for economic reasons, not for quality reasons, to be ground in other places. As a mission, we buy, like when I buy my ginseng roots, that's the whole ginseng root. When I'm buying my mushrooms, they're all mushrooms. Like there's one right behind me. You can see in the video over here. As an example, this is a whole reishi mushroom. And this is how we buy them. And by buying this way versus buying this as a powder, not only we are assured of getting material in the whole form, because when you powder them, they also start to degrade. It's kind of like why we, for those of us into drinking really good coffee, we buy whole beans, we grind them right before we make our coffee. Why do we do that? That's because as soon as you grind something into powder, it starts to oxidize and lose potency because there's more surface area for it to degrade. So when we grind it fresh in the moment, that will be the most nutrient content that we could possibly have. So we get our materials in whole form. It also allows us to look for adulteration. So when you get a powder of something like nettles, and it's a green thing, and if I get it as a powder, I can't really tell if a certain percentage of that is another green plant. We do testing for identity of genus and species, but there's sneaky ways to find things. Like ashwagandha is really popular right now, and the active part of ashwagandha is the root. If I were to buy that in a powder form, I couldn't tell if part of that was the above ground part, because it would be the same genus and species, and it would be the same color, and you can't tell. So when I buy my ashwagandha, I'm buying the whole roots, not ground, so I can really make sure it's additionally the correct part of the plant. And again, this may seem obvious, but it's unusual. Most companies are buying powders. So we buy recent harvest, the whole plant, we grind it in-house, and then we have to do identity of the plants to the genus and the species. And so that's done through something called chromatography and thin layer chromatography and very sophisticated equipment. It's expensive, but that way we can really, we say, speciate, get to the right species, so we know exactly what we have. So everything is tested. And then we do what's called organoleptics. So another quality measure in raw materials would be to taste them and look at the color and look at the smell. So what a lot of growers do when they grow their plants, especially in humid climates, is they try to dry them. You know, if they're not dried quickly, just like leaving produce on your counter, they could grow mold or bacteria. You got to dry them fast enough and get them preserved in a good way. And a lot of growers might do a secondary heat treatment of the raw material, and that starts to degrade and drive off volatile oils and smells and taste, and compounds that are sensitive to heat might be destroyed. So we've seen green leafy things come in and they're brown because they were overheated. It's the correct genus and species. It might be a whole plant form, but it's brown. And now it's legal for trade and use because it meets all the FDA requirements, but it's not therapeutic. So we wouldn't want to buy things that were overly treated and heat treated, because the federal government is really, aware that, you don't want to eat things that have high bacterial content. So we deal with that internally by our extraction processes and things we do to ensure that there's no microbial contamination. So we want live, beautiful, whole plant things. And so we do color and taste analysis of every plant that we get. And that's beyond what the FDA even requires. And then we'll test them for invisible things like heavy metals. So a lot of soil in the world, especially third world countries that burned a lot of coal and leaded gasoline, that lead that went up in the air fell into the soil, and it's there from decades ago. So we test everything we get through something called ICP-MS, and it tells us the heavy metal content of lead, cadmium, mercury, and other things that might be in it, because we don't want that in there. So we do all that kind of testing to ensure that it's safe for consumption. And then we do a full microanalysis of the raw materials to make sure they're not contaminated with yeast and mold. And again, this is like, maybe some basic quality things that make sense, but not everybody does that, which is a shame. So start with good raw materials. Then it goes into, your dosage forms, because just because you put something in your mouth doesn't mean it went in you. So we have to process these things for bioavailability and absorption. So we go through a process. Capsules are easy to talk about. When you're taking an herbal capsule, typically you're just taking a raw material, maybe like a reishi mushroom, and it's just ground and encapsulated. So you got to make sure it's really clean, pure material. So when you're looking at capsule labels, they tend not to go through as much process unless it's a standardized extract. So some botanicals get concentrated in a extraction process that increases the quantity of an active compound. Great. Some things need to be that way, like milk thistle, and it gets concentrated to what's called silymarin. But some immune herbs like echinacea aren't better by concentrating them to one active constituent, because there are many compounds in it naturally that affect immune systems. So, we want these in their raw form. And so with capsules, for quality, you want to look at the potency in milligrams of the amount of material. So one thing I'll say when you're buying things, maybe for a condition like the immune system or anything, having a long list of ingredients is not necessarily better, because you have to have enough of each active material for it to have a therapeutic effect. So something that seems really cool and there's 25 ingredients might mean that there's not enough of anything to do anything. So more is not better. You got to have a therapeutic amount of each ingredient to have an effect on your body. This is not like having a multi-mineral vitamin mega complex protein powder giant scoop of where you need tiny amounts of things. We need to have larger amounts of each compound. So what we always do is make sure that in our formulations, there's 4, 5, 6 things maybe, and we don't just add things because they're popular and people have heard of them. We want to make sure there's evidence-based therapeutic doses of each thing that we know will work together to have a therapeutic effect. So that's something to consider, that more is not better. Then you look at, on capsules, the other ingredients. And this is where a lot of things are slipped in. And then for capsule type dosage forms, you basically want to see just the name of the empty capsule. It could say vegetable cellulose. It might say hypermellose. There's a couple different words for the capsule itself. Most of those capsules are just the cellulose made from pine trees. So it goes through a process where it becomes just the cellulose, and they're really clean and they're really good. The problem is when you start to see lots of what are called excipients or carriers that make things encapsulate better and faster that aren't great for you. They're not terrible, but we want clean product, right? Why have all those extra chemical names and stuff if you don't really need them? So I try to avoid things that have words like magnesium stearate and silicon dioxide in products that just really make the herbs slicker, so they encapsulate faster and decrease the cost to encapsulate. You don't really need to have them in there, and we don't use them in our products. And the Marlene's products wouldn't have them. So the things that come through us, we just learn different ways to get things encapsulated efficiently without using those compound names. So look at the other ingredients. A lot of soft gels might have things like gelatin and carriers and words that you don't know what they are. If you've ever read any Michael Pollan, it's like, if you don't know what they are, you may want to think about that a little bit. Simple, clean, less ingredients is always better, especially on the capsules. So I'm going to put that out there on the capsule side. When it comes to liquids, they're a little bit trickier. So quality, and I'm talking about these quality things, and the content in this talk is about immunity, but these things pertain to every kind of system that you might be treating, whether it be allergies, anxiety, sleep, stress, whatever it might be. So in liquids, you want to see in there, a lot of dosages may say, take 1 milliliter a day or 30 drops, and how much is in the serving? I'll say 1 milliliter. You have any idea how much herb it took to make that liquid in the serving size? I don't suggest buying those because you don't know how much is in there, and the brand shouldn't be ashamed of saying how much is in there. Why are they keeping it a secret? So it can disclose how much is used to make that dosage in a liquid, because right, it's like tea. You drink a cup of tea, well, was 1 bag in there that made it, or 10 bags, or something in between? You want to know. So when you have a liquid in a dropper format, for instance, or any kind of, even without a dropper, hopefully the label will say how many milligrams of the raw material was used to make that serving size. So that could be in the supplemental facts box. You'll see that on some Marlene's labels, and it'll say 500 milligrams in that 1 milliliter. Sometimes the labels will have that information below the supplemental facts box, and it'll say herb weight equivalents, herb weight per serving. It'll say how many milligrams of that herb was used to make that serving size of liquid. And that helps you understand and how to compare it to a capsule or another brand, so you can see the amount of material that was used. Sometimes it's expressed in a ratio. For most people, that would be really hard to understand. So you want to see the milligram amount, but there's a trick. So some labels will say, let's say you have an echinacea, famous immune herb. And if on the supplemental facts box, it says herb weight equivalents, dry herb equivalents, that's the amount of dry herb used. If it says echinacea extract in a certain amount of milligrams, then the FDA allows you to use the weight in that serving size of the liquid itself, being water and alcohol or glycerin, whatever that is. And that water and glycerin and alcohol, that liquid carrier, is not therapeutic. It's just the carrier. So it's a glitch in the law. So when it says echinacea extract on a liquid label that may say 1,000 milligrams in that dropper full, that doesn't tell you how much of that is herb. So if it doesn't disclose that, I would be hesitant to buy that product. You want to look outside the supplemental facts box. It should say, even though you don't have to, and we always would, say how many milligrams of the dry material you used for that dose. So how do you compare? Let's say you buy echinacea, it's 500 milligrams in a squirt, and you have a capsule that's 500 milligrams in the capsule. What's better for quality-wise? Again, it goes back to what I said before. How much do you absorb? So whenever you're taking ground up herb in a capsule, the amount that's actually getting in you that you digest and absorb depends upon your digestive fortitude and strength. So you got to be able to break down the connective tissue of the plant to absorb the actives. Whereas in a liquid, it's already been extracted to be bioavailable. So when you take it, all you do is absorb it. You don't have to try to digest the actives out of that plant material and absorb it. So liquids are faster and more absorbable all the time. And they're faster. You don't have to take the time to digest them. You just absorb it. So that's something to think about. How do you define quality? I want it to work. I want it to absorb. I want fresh, clean material. I want a therapeutic amount of milligrams for this thing to work. So those are some things to consider, when looking at it. And, quality, I prefer organic raw materials. So look in the supplemental facts box, and hopefully the material was organic. Sometimes it's wild harvested, meaning it doesn't grow well on farms, and it's out in the wild and national forests and on private lands, and people will go pick it in the wild, and that's good too. If it doesn't say either of those words, that means it's conventional. It's probably grown with pesticides, legal pesticides in the United States. I'd rather buy raw materials that don't have pesticides and insecticides, because you don't need those therapeutically, obviously, and it leaves residue on the land for just having sustainable, good agricultural practices over time. So, and it goes to the concept of regeneration and healthy soils and land. So we can be growing good plant material for your kids and your kids' kids. So it's about the long term. So we only use certified organic and wild harvested plants with maybe a couple exceptions. We buy 1,000 different plants and kind of one hand that of things that you can't get organically or wild harvested. So you want to see that on the label, and that's a sign of good quality as well. For it to be, usually higher nutritional or phytochemical compounds and cleaner, which is important for your health in the short term as well as in the long term. So there's that. Then when you're taking liquids with quality and understanding therapeutic efficacy, the extraction process is important. That's up to someone like, the brand has to know their stuff. So it's all chemistry, and we understand that it keeps evolving and we keep trying to improve. So when you look at something like a mushroom, if you're going to take a liquid of a reishi mushroom, the actives, which are called polysaccharides and beta glucans, they're water soluble. So we have to do this long-term water extraction with a certain amount of heat and pressure over time to extract that material out of the mushroom. And then we concentrate it, preserve it, and get into a liquid matrix. Some things are not water soluble. And now we're going back to immunity, something like echinacea. Echinacea is poorly water soluble. Some of the actives will come out in water. So if you make echinacea tea and put a tea bag in water and then throw that tea bag away, almost all of the medicine went into the garbage can because it's not water soluble, even in hot water, no matter how long you steep it. That's also true of golden seal. Some of the actives come out, but most of it is not soluble. So I'm your pharmacist. I got to know, how do I get this stuff out of the plant? Just like when you eat food, you need different digestive enzymes for different things. I need hydrochloric acid for proteins and bile for fats, lipase for fats. And, I got to know what I need to do to get the actives out of the plant. So something like echinacea, I need high alcohol, small amount of water, percolated over time, and it pulls all these compounds out of the plant. So if you ever taste good echinacea liquid, it should make your mouth tingle because those are the alkamides that have a mouth tingling effect. So whenever you take echinacea tea and drink it, it never does that because those compounds never came out of the plant. So quality is also goes through understanding how to make those things bioavailable and extract them. So that's what we do. Golden seal needs high alcohol to water ratio to get the actives out of that plant so that when you take them, they're therapeutically active. And just because you make a tea and it changes color and tastes funky doesn't mean that the therapeutically active parts came out. So that's what we do. That's the chemistry, pharmacy that we do in making plant medicine so that they're therapeutically effective. So a couple other quality things to think about too is like when I look at plants, there's some plants that we have harvested that need to age for them to be therapeutically active. So like Cascara sagrada, famous laxative plant. We have a gentleman who goes and wild harvests the Cascara sagrada bark off the tree in the Pacific Northwestern part of the United States. Then we have to let it sit for a year to age, otherwise it's too harsh. So we're always planning more than a year ahead to get a new crop in and let it sit for a year, and that's when it's therapeutically active. Some things can't age at all. There are some plants that once they're harvested, if they dry, they're therapeutically inactive. So some things like lobelia, St. John's wort, and many others, they're best right after they're harvested. We get them within hours after harvest, and we're extracting them while they're fresh because they lose their potency and the chemicals change as the plant literally dries. So some of those plants we have to extract fresh, and that's a measure of quality therapeutic efficacy of those plant materials. So that's another thing to take into consideration that we know and that we have to do in terms of, quality. Then there's always, there's throwing a lot of stuff out there. So, all this rolls up into quality that you guys are buying brands are relying on the fact that they know all this stuff and they're doing that. So how do you as a consumer know these things? It's hard. You want to talk to staff. You want to see what they know. Call the companies and ask them these questions as much as you can and as you learn to find out the source of their raw materials. A lot of companies, it's tough just because you end up with salespeople and customer service agents, and they don't know the answers to those questions. So you're really relying on those brands. It helps to have brands that have been doing this for a long time, because brands that make product that aren't therapeutically effective go out of business. So you want someone like, I'll toot our horn, Vitality Works. Last week was the beginning of our 43rd year making plant medicines. And we're growing dramatically every year because our stuff works. And we're getting the right materials from the right suppliers all over the world. And that's really important. And these things should taste like what they are. So if you know what it's like, I've tasted licorice root extracts that don't taste like licorice root. It should taste like what it is. And it should be the color of what it is. And they probably don't taste good. So if you go in there and you're actually tasting some of these botanicals and you go, oh, I like that Golden Seal brand that tastes kind of good. It's nasty. It's super bitter. And it should be kind of intense. These are not tasty foods. You can dilute them in water if they're liquids and drink them down, or take capsules where you don't taste them. But if you open them up and smell them, they should have viability in smell and taste. You buy a cinnamon cap and you taste, it should taste like cinnamon. Golden Seal should be super bitter. Echinacea should make your mouth tingle. So there's things like that as you learn and grow in this that you understand, and that makes a difference. Mushrooms, we extract our mushrooms. Our mushroom supplier, our mushroom grower, grows his mushrooms. It takes 2 to 3 months to grow his mushrooms before they harvest. You get great mycelium fruiting bodies, and they're immunomodulating. Most brands of even the most famous mushroom brands out there grow their mushrooms for maybe 1 month, and they don't have the full potency of mushrooms that are left to grow 3 months, fully consume their growth media that they grow on, and put out beautiful fruiting bodies in addition to the mycelia that grows in the growing media, so that you have a full spectrum version of that mushroom. So it should taste that way. So sometimes if you're doing a liquid, you can compare brands by taste and say, which one just is like more intense, not tastes better. You want something that tastes better? Go buy some ice cream. Go eat a nice meal. Herbal medicine is herbal medicine, so it should be super strong. So that's something to consider, in your choices and what you're buying. So that's some ways to tell the difference. And at this point, hopefully I gave some information. That's a lot to digest on what goes into a good therapeutic quality measure. And almost all the things I mentioned are way beyond the basic regulations that the FDA requires you to have just to make these things. And additionally, the things we make, we're a GMP third-party certified company for all the products that we make. We're organic certified, we're kosher certified, we're non-GMO, we're gluten-free. All that rolls into the Marlene's product for assurance that, that there's nothing better that you could possibly find in the marketplace. So at this point, Elizabeth, just to throw that back, I'd be happy to talk about, some herbal things for the immune system that are more geared toward prevention versus what you take when you're sick, or if you want me to veer into some other things, I'm happy to do so at this time.
Thank you so much, Mitch. Um, I just love that you put high quality first and the efficacy of the products, so then the consumers can get the best value. So thank you for all you do, first and foremost.
Oh, sure, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And yeah, I would definitely love, and I know those who are watching would love to know about immunity, especially this time of the year with the transition into fall. Um, yeah, please share.
Okay. So for maximum effect, I always separate out what do you take to prevent before you're sick versus what do you take when you're sick or acute. A lot of people don't understand the difference, so I'll break into that. Some botanicals boost your immune system to be more on alert all the time. And that's where two famous herbs come into play. And that would be echinacea and astragalus. They're king and queen of this approach. and they're poorly understood, but they're famous words. So what they do, for instance, what echinacea does when you take it is, I mean, if you took echinacea and just subjected it to bacteria, it's not going to do anything. It doesn't kill things. Neither does astragalus, which is a Chinese herb. Echinacea is a famous herb that grows in the United States. What these herbs do, for instance, echinacea, is it stimulates your body's ability to be on a heightened alert. So you have a certain type of white blood cell that circulates in your bloodstream called a neutrophil. And what the white blood cells, they identify things that shouldn't be there. And you have your initial immunity that circulates in your bloodstream called neutrophils. Then you have your innate immunity through your lymph node that identifies things that are there and goes, that shouldn't be here. And it makes compounds and lymphocytes specifically to go target COVID or a flu or just something bad or candida and go gobble it up. What echinacea does with those white blood cells that circulate called neutrophils, it makes them more active. It's called phagocytosis. And if you have the image, if you've ever played Pac-Man, it's that round thing and it goes and it gobbles up dots, right? So when your immune system is deficient, they go slow. And those buggers that are starting to come in can really multiply and overwhelm your body. That's when you're sick. And it's doing this all the time, from everything you ate, every time you inhaled, everything you drank, every orifice in your body is a way for things to get in. And you have a lot of activity there to keep you well and be in a homeostasis. So echinacea will stimulate those white blood cells all the time to just do what they're supposed to do, especially for people who have a deficient immune system because, you know, they took a lot of antibiotics and ibuprofen and aspirin over time growing up. That's what everyone thought. And now you tend to get what's going around every year. So even if you get sick once a year, that's a deficient immune system. I don't even think you should get sick once a year, no matter what's going around. So taking echinacea just keeps you on alert. There's bad folklore out there and myth that if you take echinacea all the time, it'll make your immune system weaker. That's an incorrect interpretation of a study that came out of Germany in the 1960s that was populated in this industry that was incorrect. And the people who started that rumor have recanted it, but this is where people seem to believe it. Echinacea doesn't work well once you're sick. It's meant to be taken like it's October now, because kids went back to school, and once Thanksgiving and Christmas comes around and New Year's, people start to really get sick. You say, I always get sick around then. You take it before that season, like now, and you take it every day through the whole season. Get through the whole season and beyond that season and see that maybe you won't get sick. And that's what the studies even show, that people who take echinacea don't get sick as often, and if they do, it doesn't last as long. So echinacea stimulates these white blood cells to increase their activity, what's called phagocytosis. Astragalus is used the same way, but it works in a different part of the immune system. It works in your lymph system to make sure it's constantly identifying what shouldn't be in you, make the correct white blood cells or lymphocytes that come out of your lymph system and go attack these things so you don't end up with colds and flus and temperature, fevers, and lots of mucus production. And so you don't get COVID when everybody else is getting it. You don't get the things going around. You can travel to countries that have buggers that you're not used to where everyone gets sick. Not if you take this stuff, but you gotta take it before, ideally, as soon as you know. So echinacea and astragalus, and they're very well researched. There's an abundance of information on both. You know, even, you know, people that are going through chemotherapy that makes them, their immune system so sensitive they get pneumonias. If you take echinacea and especially astragalus, it keeps your immune system active innately to go fight things off. They're best together. So we combine them. You can buy them separately and take them. We combine them in a formula called ImmunoWell RX with things like maitake and shiitake mushroom that also work kind of that way for long-term to boost you so you don't get sick later on. And you can take them. So I've been taking that ImmunoWell RX since February of 2020. That was when the first word came out that there's this global pandemic that's about to start called COVID. And I wanted to stay on alert because it's about being overwhelmed by how much COVID is coming into you. And it's measured in how many of the viral parts your body is trying to fight off. So if you can fight off more at once, you're not overwhelmed and you don't get it. So I've been taking RX and I never got COVID. Maybe I wouldn't have gotten it otherwise. But my partner at home got it. We did nothing preventative. I mean, I was around it all the time and I didn't mask up and I didn't get it. In my company, we'd have 20, 30 people at a time that had it and I never got it. And so, that's something to take. I've been taking it every day, quite frankly, for the past 4 years, because it's been an immune trying 4 years since COVID first started. So, but it's not about COVID. It's about keeping your immune system on alert. If you have kids going to school, you work in the public domain, you work in a hospital, you work in a health food store where sick people come in and they're coughing at you. Why not? There's no side effects to them. You can take them long term, and that's how they're indicated and how to take them. Once you're sick, you got to take different stuff. That's where things like Golden Seal comes in. Golden Seal is only when you're already sick with mucus production, it's discolored, you're feeling hot and cranky and achy. And you take it usually no more than 2 weeks because it helps turn that around. It's excreted in the respiratory system, in the GI system, in the urinary tract. And it helps to really kill stuff that's active in those systems. So that's when you take Golden Seal. Probably the strongest thing to take when you're actually acute is oregano oil. Oregano oil is mostly a compound called carvacrol. It kills stuff. So when you take oregano oil, it doesn't boost you to be more immune preventative, later on. You take it because you need it now. It kills stuff. It doesn't boost you to do it like echinacea, astragalus, or RX. Oregano oil is great at the very first sign of I'm going down, I'm coughing, I've got some mucus I'm excreting, I'm feeling like I'm in that uh-oh stage where I'm going down. You take oregano oil. You can take, oregano oil is probably the broadest antimicrobial thing in the whole herbal world. It'll kill candida, it'll kill yeast and mold and E. coli, staph, salmonella, tons of bacteria, lots of viruses. So oregano oil acutely, you could travel with it and take it when you need it, is great acutely. So it also kills parasites. I've seen it in third world countries where groups travel. The only people that don't get parasites are the ones taking oregano oil. Otherwise, they're doing the same things. So it's acutely oriented. And then I'll mention a couple other things for when you're acute on the immune side. There's another herb called Osha, which is in the bronchial syrup, and it's also in a product called Congestes. And Osha, OSHA, which is a plant that grows in the Rockies at high elevation, southern New Mexico, northern New Mexico, southern Colorado. Osha stimulates a certain type of white blood cell that only lives in your respiratory tract and your lungs. They're not circulating in your blood. They don't go everywhere. And there's a lot here because you inhale, and your immune system is always making sure that you stay okay. Osha takes those resident white blood cells in your lungs and respiratory tract and makes them really active. And it pulls a lot of blood into the surface capillaries of your lungs to pull those white blood cells in there. It also helps facilitate an exchange of dumping carbon dioxide and pulling in oxygen, so it oxygenates you. It bronchodilates, it opens up your lungs. It makes this whole, it's like giving the white blood cells in your lungs big doses of caffeine and they go nuts. And they fight stuff off to resolve congestion and colds, flus, pneumonias, bronchitises. And that's what you take when you're acute in your lungs. And so we literally have people that we've been working with that go wild harvest in the high Rockies in these public places with permits to get these plants, and they bring them to us within 24 hours of harvest. We're extracting them fresh out of the ground. And it's by far the best respiratory specific herb to take when you're acute. It's amazing. Warms your lungs, increases oxygen uptake, bronchial dilates. So yes, asthmatic-y kind of thing, smoker's cough. It's great. So it works when you're acute or going into those situations where you want to fight it off right now. Now, of all the herbs I mentioned right now, while they're stimulating that part of your immune system, remember your immune system does thousands of things. So can you take these things if I have an autoimmune disorder? If I have MS or lupus or myasthenia gravis or fibromyalgia, those autoimmune disorders, or long haul COVID is autoimmune. Your immune system is too active and it doesn't need to be on the long haul side. These herbs do not exacerbate that part of your immune system. So they're safe to take for that. They won't overstimulate that cascade of functionality in your body. So these herbs are very specific in what they do. So they're safe for autoimmune disorders. I just want to make sure that that's clear. One other formulation I'll mention for the acute mode, sinus infections, whether it be secondary to an allergy or just, excuse me, a sinus infection. The sinuses don't have a lot of blood supply. So it's hard for whether an antibiotic or an herb to get in there just because they're in its tight spaces. So they're hard to treat. So a lot of people do nasal sprays with addictive clearing out OTC type drugs that are, people have rebound effects and they're not great. So we put together a product to blast open your sinuses. So what does that? You ever been into a sushi restaurant and you had too much wasabi? And what happens is like sinus missiles, horseradish, they just blast them open. You have all the sinus drainage. So we formulated a wasabi-based formulation, heavy, big-time fresh horseradish grown in the Klamath Valley of Oregon, certified organic. They harvest it fresh, ship it to us. We extract fresh horseradish, and we add a lot of peppermint oils, and we add echinacea and golden seal and osha and garlic and all these immunomodulating herbs. And it's a liquid. When you take that liquid and you swallow it and you inhale through your nose, and you pull all these like horseradish, menthol vapors with the osha, it immediately opens up your sinuses. There's immediately sinus drainage and you can breathe, and then the blood flows in there and your immune system can do its thing. And you're taking these herbs to stimulate your immune system. And it's amazing. I mean, I just use it when I'm skiing at high elevations, 10, 11, 12,000 feet, just so I can really breathe well. Just as like a in the moment kind of thing, or athletically induced asthma or sinus infections and congestion in there, or people who snore a lot and the soft palate really gets congested and it just opens up all those breathing passageways. Is fantastic. It's intense. So you got to warn people that, when you take it, close your mouth, inhale through your nose to pull the vapors up into the sinuses, and it's really immediate. So sinus blaster within drops or a spray in your mouth is something that you want to have around if that tends to be you, and use it when and as you need it, as often as you need it. It's got a whole bunch of herbs in there as well that are all sinus immunomodulating right now kind of herbs. So that's another key one. And I'll finish with one other one, and that's elderberry. Elderberry was the #1 herb during COVID. Why? What we've known about why elderberry works all these years is the fact that it neutralizes the protein spikes on viruses. And that's what the COVID vaccination did. It worked with the protein spikes. That knowledge base wasn't new. It's just to finally find something that targeted the specific COVID virus, specifically to neutralize it. People were dying. To neutralize that so they didn't go those infections. Okay, this is herb class. So the main herb that neutralizes protein spikes on viruses, the metagluten protein spikes on viruses, is elderberry. It just needs to be really strong. So we make a syrup out of it called sambucus. That's the Latin name for elderberry. And a dose of the elderberry syrup is 6,400 milligrams of elderberries used to create that teaspoon dose of elderberry. And so for acute viral implications, it's great. That's what it does. So that's another option you can take when you feel like this is a virus, it's a flu. Flus are viral, they're not bacterial. So even taking antibiotics don't treat colds and flus if they're viruses, which is what they are. So this is herb class. So you could take sambucus syrup, elderberry syrup. It's good to have around. You can combine it with OSHA. You can combine it with oregano oil. It's like, go for it. Take a lot. First symptoms, first signs when you're feeling like you already got it, it's going down because the viral load isn't as big. It keeps replicating. Treat it as soon as you can. Better than that, do preventative so you don't even end up over there. So we're differentiating what you take to not get sick. Sometimes things happen, you got sick anyways, you switch and you go to those other botanicals from a high quality source, prepared correctly to give you a chance for them to work because you want strong, fresh, properly made materials from a GMP facility, which is what all the Marlene's market brand is, and these things. And then you'll have a chance for these things to work. So yeah, I just want to get that opportunity to give that information out there about quality that goes into preparing these and differentiating somewhat briefly preventative versus now I'm sick, and a little bit more specifically, what do you do with sinus stuff and lung stuff with OSHA? So I can start to finish that up right now and see if there's anything else, Elizabeth, that you'd like me to flesh out, or how we doing?
Thank you. Um, yeah, that was a really good overview of that because there was a lot that I didn't know, and there was some herbs that I was like, oh, I thought that was used for before, but it's not. So thank you.
Sure, sure. Yeah. The more we know, the more specifically we can use things, the more success we'll have. And, then we don't forget them, right? We had a great response. And even if you're taking things like the preventive echinacea astragalus, and, I don't know if it worked. I got through the whole winter and suddenly it's April. You go, but I never got sick. Ah, that's what you're supposed to do, you know, and it's remarkable. And I mean, I had a patient who was on antibiotics 8 times a year, and I gave them echinacea. They took it for 9 months, and they didn't need to take any antibiotics anymore.
Wow,
So
that's
it
incredible.
builds up immune function, and it helps to maintain that activity, so that you don't even have to do it the next year because now your body is functioning normally, and you don't need it in the same way. And it
That
was
is
a really positive outcome.
oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I did have a question about what would you recommend for stress relief? I know a lot of folks, especially coming out of COVID, are still dealing with a little bit of stress and anxiety.
Sure. So two different approaches. One is, what do you take directly to handle anxiety right now? Then there's other things to take so that you can handle more stress without going into anxiety, the preventative side. So for anxiety right now, the best thing is kava, no doubt. So when you have anxiety and stress, it's usually about adrenaline, and you're
Mm,
surging adrenaline and cortisol, which we read a lot about. And it's a natural response. The fight or flight response is a natural response to stress. And it's a political year. It's intense and mean. It's pitting family members against each other. People are stressed about COVID. People are stressed about money. People are stressed about hurricanes. There's a lot to worry about. And the news is really good about flushing about fear and everything you should worry about. And people talk a lot about things that make them anxious. Kava decreases the adrenaline push and it calms down without sedating you and making you feel sleepy and tired. So there's a difference between herbs that make you sleepy. That's valerian, hops, St. John's wort, skullcap, chamomile. Those are sleepy herbs. So they may decrease some anxiety, but they make you sleepy, but they don't decrease adrenaline. That's a different function.
mm,
So to decrease adrenaline and cortisols, kava is king, queen, princess, and prince. And so any kind of kava product, the liquid kavas work faster. It's not water soluble, so the liquid extracts are better than the capsules. The capsules still work if you don't want to take a liquid. And even there's some kavas that we make for you guys standardized to 30% kava lactone, the active constituent. That's a stronger version of kava. So those are effective. And there's a formula that we make called um, Anxiety Ease and Kava Gold. And they had a couple other herbs that do a similar thing about decreasing the adrenaline and cortisol push right now. So the people who take kava and say it makes me sleepy, what I want to say is for a lot of people, when you take away the anxiety and that stress and that crankiness, it makes you feel where you're really at. So underneath that push, you may go, oh my God, I'm exhausted, and you can sleep better. So for a lot of people who don't sleep well because they're thinking too much and can't turn this off, even though they're exhausted, you don't need a central nervous system sedative. You need to turn off the adrenaline push and the cortisol push. Then you go, oh my God, thank you. And you conk out and you go into a deeper sleep state without wild dreams in the same way. So that's what kava is about. But some people take kava in the morning and it takes away the H part of ADHD and that hyper kind of whatever. They can actually focus better because they're not spending all that energy on the neurotic and anxious H part of ADHD. And you focus better, you perform better on tests, cognitive functionalities. So kava is great for most Americans and most, it just, because it doesn't make you less cognitive or sleepy. If it does, that means you're exhausted and need to get more sleep. You need to get your 7 to 8 hours and reboot. And people say, I only need 4 hours a night. Man, that's not true. There's going to be, unless you're a freak of nature, that's going to have a lot of physiologic consequence. So that's my favorite approach for anxiety, stress, kava products. Now, how do you build your body's ability to adapt to stress so you don't produce so much adrenaline and cortisol in the first place? And that's a group of herbs called adaptogens. They increase your body's ability to adapt to stress. Your body adapts to stress because when you have a lot of stress, one part of your brain, your primal brain called your amygdala, tells your hypothalamus and pituitary to go make a lot more adrenaline and cortisol from your adrenal cortex that sit on top of your kidneys and your back. And it starts this cascade because your body thinks it needs to fight or flight, some kind of stress factor. But you can train your body to handle a lot more stress and not even make as much of those chemicals that make you feel anxious if you take them all the time. They do nothing right now. You got to take them over time. And that's your formula called Adrenal RX. And that's how the following herbs work. They all work that way with slightly different action. That would include ashwagandha, American ginseng, Chinese ginseng, Eleuthero, which used to be called Siberian ginseng. It includes schizandra, includes cordyceps a bit, and reishi mushroom work that way. These are herbs which increase your body's ability to adapt to stress. Let me just make sure I'm not missing one of the famous herbs in there to mention. And rhodiola, big one. Yeah, rhodiola, super important. Those herbs that I mentioned we put all together in a therapeutic amount of each one. Because again, they work a little bit differently at different compounds to have that. So they increase what's called adrenocorticotropic hormone. That's the hormone that says, okay, you're really under a lot of stress, but I'll still make the right amount of estrogens and progesterones and digestive enzymes and make sure you make the right amount of melatonin so you can sleep. And I won't go into a hyperinflammatory autoimmune disorder as much because autoimmune disorders are exacerbated by stress. But if you can handle more stress, maybe you don't have as much of your autoimmune disorder or your allergies or your migraines or your digestive dysfunction or sleep disruptions. Everybody needs these. I think because of the culture we live in right now and the amount of, neurologic input and our ability to use these smartphones and crank all over the place and social media scanning, Instagrammy, and suddenly you're getting less sleep and you've been on it for too many hours, increases adrenaline and cortisol.
Mhm.
So we have to adapt to that faster than the technology is adapting us. I think adaptogens like Adrenal RX and those herbs, ashwagandha, rhodiola, the ginsengs, schizandras, those are more in need fundamentally for everybody than a multivitamin or a protein powder or a megaplex mineral, whatever, because more people are breaking down faster from stress than they are from vitamin deficiency. Everyone needs these. So I put programs together, say, what do I just take to not age as fast and to ward off my genetic predispositions and function well with my loved ones and work and kids and parents. And yeah, everything is stressful. And adaptogens, everybody needs them every day for the rest of their life as much as possible. I've been taking them for 30 plus years every day. It's part of my normal routine because I want to feel good and not burn out and not get sick and not elicit the DNA that my parents gave me, quite frankly. And everyone has their version of whatever it is, doesn't matter. So the more your body can chemically adapt to stress and produce the right amount of digestive enzymes and eliminate correctly and sleep correctly and hormone correctly, women and men, you won't need those other things as much. Maybe you'll have less anxiety. Maybe you'll have less autoimmune disorder. Not even maybe, that is what happens. So adaptogens, I think, should be in everyone's supplement program forever until you move to the island and turn off any kind of news and no social media and eat perfectly and exercise perfectly. You know, adaptogens are indicated for stress. So hopefully I explained that's what you take all the time. But as you need, kava can work like now for something bad going on, or if it's chronic for you all the time, kids with the H part of ADHD, it's great for kids, anybody, any age. You take it all the time, and maybe you don't need as much of the Xanax, Klonopin, Halcyon, or alcohol or marijuana. It's kind of like yoga in a bottle. Kava's kind of like, it's a deep breath. It's like, let me cycle down right now. And so I go, hi, I'm here. I'm, not burning so much of my life energy on stress, anxiety, which is a chemical reality that you can treat with herbs. So I
Thank
hope
you
I hope
so
that
much,
helped.
Mitch. That was excellent. Kava, yes.
For sure. Yeah.
Um, so we have a question in the chat box. Recently noticed there's a number of different kinds of cinnamon. Which one is healthier and which one do you recommend?
Yeah. So cinnamon is good for helping for blood sugar control and the consequences of long time, you know, hypoglycemia, diabetes that can lead to lots of bad secondary side effects. So most of the studies were done on a type of cinnamon called Cinnamomum cassia. It's a Chinese cinnamon. It's a real common cinnamon. There's also other words, types of cinnamon, true cinnamons like xylanicum. Uh, but the cinnamons done that are used in the studies are the really inexpensive Cinnamomum cassia or aromaticum, uh, which are the ones we buy because you can buy them, they're not very expensive. You don't need super fancy cinnamons because the studies weren't done on those. So you got to take some milligrams of cinnamon to have that blood sugar effect. So, the cinnamon, just to confirm, I got the Latin word terminology right. Yeah. That version of cinnamon, we'll go one other place. Um, yeah, the cinnamon aromaticum, cinnamon cassia species are the therapeutic ones. The other ones work as well. It's just you don't need to spend that kind of money for that effect. So, and you take grams of it. So if you're going to use it, it's not like you're taking 25 milligrams. You want to take a gram or more a day on a regular basis. And it'll help prevent long-term effects of blood sugar issues that can result in glaucoma and, deposits in the eyes of sorbitol plaquing and peripheral circulatory problems, and help normalize blood sugar in a way that will help so many things, along with exercise and diet. It's a factor in everything, of course. So yeah, that's the cinnamon to take. It works. You can take cinnamon, take a teaspoon and put it in a little water and drink it. Take our cinnamon capsules. Cinnamon doesn't really form a liquid extract really well because it turns into a gel. So when we make cinnamon extracts and try to make it really strong, it turns into a solid like cranberry sauce. So you don't see it as a liquid very much. It's really in the capsule realm for that reason. So hopefully that was helpful.
Perfect. Thank you, Mitch.
Sure. Great.
We got any more questions here for our lovely expert? I love picking your brain.
Sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah. 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 The more we all learn, the more successful we'll be in use of these things.
Exactly. And health is wealth.
Health is wealth. And especially with diet and exercise, you can't minimize that. And emotional well-being, you know what the goal of supplements is? The goal is to not need to take them because we've done so many good things. Our body has normalized and hopefully after that, we're not always needing them for acute problems. We're just taking things to be well in the long term. So, for myself, my family has a lot of cardiovascular issues that I inherited.
Mhm.
So I have got the MTHR genetic deficiency where I don't methylize my folates and my homocysteine's high. So I take that supplement and my homocysteine's in the normal range. I decrease my cardiac potential in such a big way because my body doesn't work that way. So I take that. And I take adaptogens because I work too hard and long and do too much and I love it. And I want to burn out. We take supportive things because of how we are, but better to eat our vitamins and minerals and get them that way, and stress modulation through exercise and yoga and deep breathing and all those things. And then we supplement around it because life isn't perfect and we need a little bit of help.
Exactly. It's like supplements equals support.
Yeah.
And it has like the um same root word or prefix.
Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, the body wants to heal, wants to get better. Let's just give it a chance and nudge it along that pathway every day, and our body will respond accordingly.
Beautiful. Oh, thank you so much, Mitch. I appreciate
Sure.
all you do with Vitality Works. Definitely, folks, check out that Marlene's private label. And now you heard it straight from the expert here, how amazing those products are. And we are always very grateful to have you, Mitch. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. I hope it helped. Thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime.
Thanks. Okay.
Everyone take care.